Corruption flourishes in the dark, in the shadows. With more data, more figures, more numbers, more interferences, more whistleblowing as well, we have better access to things that were deliberately hidden from us.
You are in New York talking to world leaders and you're looking at the state of the global economy. When you look around, what do you think looks good and where do you see signs of worry?
Well, I have one good indicator. Are we revising our forecast up or down? And for the last 6 years, we've been revising our forecast down. So whatever we forecasted was overly optimistic. We are now revising upwards, and we've done that for at least 3 times. So that tells me that the recovery is certain. What we are seeing in the numbers is that it is well spread across the advanced, emerging and low-income countries. And we're also seeing it reasonably well balanced. It's clearly coming out of Europe, of Japan, from the United States, but a little bit less than what we had expected. The UK is not in strong recovery mode for all sorts of uncertainties that loom on their horizon, but we are seeing a much stronger momentum for that recovery.
When you look at the incredible drop in global poverty, and the IMF's had a big hand in making that happen, and then you hear in advanced economies people complaining about their state in life, what's going on with their economies, feeling like the country is not the one they recognize, and the rise of economic nationalism. How do you think about that from an IMF perspective?
We understand where they're coming from, but we have to keep a cool head and see both the benefits and the downside of what has happened in the last 30 years. And the benefits, you mentioned them. Hundreds of millions of people have been lifted out of poverty. And that's a huge plus. But it's not going to have any effect on those who are losing their jobs because of automation, robotization, transformation of their workplace. It's not going to be of any help to those people whose factory is closing down because the manufacturing cycle is moving somewhere else. So we have to be mindful of benefits on the one hand, the downside, and how the downsides can be addressed by very special programs in order to help people adjust to that new economy of ours.
You're in New York and you were talking a little bit about corruption, tax evasion. This is an area that you are starting to steer the IMF toward. I'm curious why you've decided this is something the IMF needs to fight. Why now?
We have been looking at it and trying to address issues of tax evasion, corruption for the last so many years. I think what we're seeing now is a different approach, which is helped by the surge of civil society, by the added transparency caused by more data, more information, more access. So I think that that's an element that is pushing us into doing more than we have in the past. This is under review. We clearly need to improve our ways of dealing with it. But I can tell you something, whenever it is macro-critical, whenever it is a brake on growth, whenever it's an impediment, we react, we address. There have been instances where we had to just stop a program. You know, when we find out that, for instance, a government is hiding off budget, of special purpose vehicles, in the dark, use of public finance for private purposes or for strange purposes, when we find out, we just stop the program. We say, terribly sorry, but unless and until that comes to the surface, we are not going to continue to help the country.
And how do the governments react when you declare that?
They don't like it. Right. They don't like it. We do that in the area of pure corruption. We do that in the area of money laundering. And we have had programs of anti-money laundering for the last 20 years. And we have served many, many countries with technical assistance. We have helped banks track down money laundering and the financing of terrorism in order to help them stop it. But sometimes people don't like it.
I think those of us watching from afar when Greece went through its tremendous troubles, we read about the problems with how the tax evasion in Greece in particular had hollowed out the economic core of the country. Was Greece an eye-opener for you also, or were you aware that this was something that you were going to have to deal with? And what kind of processes did you put in place to be able to help Greece to get to the other side?
Greece is not the only country in that situation, and tax evasion, profit shifting, base erosion are very well spread diseases, and I'm calling them diseases because it's taking money away from the public purse in a way, and it's preventing policymakers and elected generally governments from making the right decisions and financing the right projects for the people. So I think there are many of us who have, together with the World Bank, the OECD, the UN as well, we have tried to address this issue of base erosion and profit shifting. Now, tax evasion is one step further. And clearly it's for the domestic authorities of a country to address the issue and to fight tax evasion. So we have tools, techniques that can help, but it takes a clear political determination to attack tax evasion and to audit and to follow and to collect and to have in place the right settlement procedures, and it's improving.
Mm-hmm. When you think about how FinTech works within this question about corruption, doesn't FinTech also allow people, though, to be able to evade tax collectors? Sure. Couldn't that eventually make the problem worse?
Sure. FinTech is a big bag word,
right.
And in that bag you find the FinTechs for good and the FinTechs for bad. It's oversimplifying the issue, but when artificial intelligence, data mining, distributed ledger technologies, artificial intelligence are sort of bundled together in order to address the issue of correspondent banking relationships, to prevent a country from being cut off from the international financing system. That's great. That is helping.
Do you think governments, especially in developing countries, are ready to regulate and monitor what's going on with some of these advanced technologies in their country?
I think it's an issue for all governments, not just developing countries. I think the advanced economies, the emerging markets, and the low-income countries are all at risk of not anticipating, not supervising, not being on the top of those technologies. And I think it should be a common endeavor between the private sector, the innovators, the disruptors, and the authorities to make sure that all those innovations operate within a framework that avoids the bad fintechs.
Does the IMF play a role in providing that education?
We try very much so. We have a group of fintech experts within the organization. We have reached out to financial disruptors, and they are advising us as well. And we are a great forum where we can convene the various operators in order to actually debate those issues and see what is the best way to both promote and guard against the abuse.
You've talked a lot about gender and gender parity, and you brought up the idea of gender budgeting. This is something a lot of countries do, but I don't think a lot of people are familiar with it. Can you explain what it means and why you think this is something that everyone should be adopting?
First of all, I think that you have to measure things as much as possible in order to improve the situation and in order to continue the policy that you have decided. So if you decide that, if a government, for instance, decides that it wants to have more talent around the table, or it has to deal with its demographic issues, such as aging, and women are the answer, it needs to spend money, and it needs to identify in each and every ministries what will be actually conducive to increasing the number of women, increasing their contribution to the economy, giving them better access to finance, making sure that there are enough childcare centres and that they are properly budgeted, making sure that there are not too many licenses and hurdles to stop women from accessing the job market. And that requires, within each and every ministry, to identify what measures will actually have a gender-positive output. That's jargonic, you see, not good. But you know, if they decide that a particular budget will increase the childcare centres' opening hours, that is positive, because it means that women will be able to have more flexibility, stay a bit longer at work, not necessarily take a part-time job, but have a full-time job, and on and on. And that can be done within each and every ministry.